I'm very pleased to be here and to be able to share my journey from digital fashion. How did I get to digital fashion? How did I get to fashion as a lecturer? Because I'm a teacher in the different fashion institutions at the moment, and I started as a visual artist. So this is not like a class about how to do digital fashion with the software. It's more like sharing my journey. How did it become from being like a regular person into wearing these like amazing astronaut outfits. I am currently a fashion lecturer, but I describe myself as a time traveler, and this is my astronaut suit that is provided by special items. I'm going to show you what they do in a second. Why do I consider that I'm like a time traveler? Is because I teach history of fashion. That's how I got into fashion. But what I do with students is we take what they want to do, we take their inspirations, and I reverse engineering, and we look at moments in the fashion history where that also clicks. A very easy example is the corset, that now is very fashionable, and queer people are using it on top of their bodies, and at some point corsets were used to restrict women and control women, and they were actually producing medical problems to women. So we can grab the corset and also connect it to Madonna in the 90s with her Broad Ambition tour. So there's different moments for different garments that have different meanings. And that's what I do with students. So we go back and forth from today, the trends of the street wear from today, and we travel back in time and we look at moments or references on how to enrich their ideas and enrich their collections and finally develop a collection. But let's go back and let me introduce myself a little bit. I'm going to be switching applications. I hope computer behaves well. Let's see how that's going to work. I have a traditional PowerPoint, and I'm going to switch to other presentation formats. Here we go. Oh, we start. Yes. So this is my brand. It's called Displaced. It's the name of my first collection. You can see why it's called, and it became my brand name. So it went beyond a collection name. I work with displacement of concepts, displacement of identities, and displacement maps as well. But let me show you where it all started. This is the content for today, so just a quick introduction. Then how did I went from street art into digital fashion? Then I'm going to give you like a complete view of the Displays collection, which is a capsule collection of only 6 looks. And then we are going to discuss fashion in the Metaverse, or meta fashion. And hopefully it becomes a good conversation, and I just want to spark some ideas. I'm not an expert. There's very few people who can say they're experts in fashion in the Metaverse. So we're all kind of like discovering what it can be and the possibilities. So that's what I want to do. I want to put some ideas, and hopefully they will inspire you as well. So this is me, first day at school. I'm still that person, and we always talk in education about lifelong learning, and I really believe in that. We don't stop learning when we go on a summer vacation. We don't stop learning when we finish high school or when we finish a master. I think people should be lifelong learners. So if you have a lot of curiosity, you're going to be learning all your life. And that's how I define myself, and that's why I get myself constantly into trouble, because I go into different areas and I know nothing about, and I start from square one. So these are some things that define me, but that's not who I am, but it's part of who I am. So fun facts, I'm a vegan, and I became a flex vegan, so I cheat. I'm a communications consultant. I studied art, and that's the most, I think, important thing from like my profile. But where did I start? I'm a kid of the 80s. I grew up in the 80s with TV and radio, and that's it. And this is the first computer, and it was not mine, it was my neighbor's. And then it's like I had to go to his house to play with the Sinclair ZX. Back in the day, that was it. It looks very modern, by the way, for being from the 80s. It was like visionary design. 60 kilobyte, 1982. So the way we played games was you bought a magazine, it came with a game in code, and you have to type the whole code for like a week. By the end of that week, if you didn't make any spelling mistake, like one comma would kill the game. So you had to program it, and we took turns, so I would program one day, my friend programmed the other day, until you program the game, and then you could play it. And if you wanted to switch the game, you had to wait another week to program it again. So this is how I started into like gaming. Then technology advanced. 1 year later, the other neighbor got like Atari, so I could go and play with cassettes. That was like a major improvement because we didn't have to type the program anymore. We could just put the cassette, it would play, and it would load the game. So by the time the cassette played, you could play it. So from 1 week, we went to a couple of hours. Skip, I did the art school in the 90s. I was a little bit grown up, and I did all traditional printing. So I went from stone printing to plastic lino print to wood printing, and then I did silkscreen, like the technique of Andy Warhol. And from silkscreen, I did photography, and then we got the first computers in the art academy. So I was the first generation who got like a computer lab. And we had Photoshop 3, which didn't have layers. So it had one layer. And what you did there, that was it. So then Photoshop 4 was like amazing because you had different layers and you could undo more than one time. Back in the day, you could undo one time. So it was one undo, and then you did something, and then you had to start over again. And Illustrator didn't exist, so we used freehand, also very clunky. So this is how I started in 1995. 1995. So then I graduated and I decided to earn some money as an artist, so I started designing web pages. This was it. So it was Web 1.0. I started as a web designer in Web 1.0, and my first job was to actually migrate companies from paper to web, and that's what I was doing in early 90s. Then, quick fast forward, I moved to the Netherlands. I worked freelance for 7 years as an artist and a designer financing my projects. And then by the time I quit art, it was 2012, and I started training people into Web 2, so explaining to managers and other people how to use social media. I trained other people, and that's when I decided to go into education and publishing. And I stopped designing multimedia, and I went into education and marketing and publishing. But we're going to skip that. So this is a little bit my trajectory. I started as a kid gamer. I studied art. I financed my project as a designer. Then I went into corporate from 2008 until 2018. It was 10 years where I worked in several marketing projects, sustainability communications as well. And then I got tired of the corporate world, and I quit, and I did a coaching course, and I became a fashion teacher. So it's funny because I was working for pharma projects, which killed my soul, and then I just quit, and I went from pharma to fashion, which is like the boldest move that I've done in my life, and it was amazing. So I had to learn again the history of fashion from the history of art. I made a course of history of art, and I started loading year by year different aspects to it. So we saw the history of fashion, then I loaded body positivity, inclusivity, women's rights, and it became a very interesting cultural analysis course. And where am I? I just made the path from being a fashion teacher in lockdown. I started doing digital fashion. So I downloaded Cloth 3D, which is the software I'm going to quickly show here. And I taught myself in a year, on the weekends, how to design fashion. So I've been learning how to be a fashion designer, pattern making, and now the next step for me is Web3. So I'm not like an expert in NFTs or anything. I'm trying to figure out how to use the garments that I do and how to make them interoperable and usable and utilitarian in the Web3 space. So if you have some ideas, I'm open for everything. So that was what I just was telling you. This is Cloth 3D. I started during lockdown. This is one of my latest projects, which is called Under My Skin. It's not in my collection, so I quickly describe it. It's a piece of my arm that I scanned when I got my first scanner. So in 1994, got my scanner. First thing that I scan my arm. I did a piece of scan, and this is a little piece of my arm that I turned into a pattern. This is kind of like a Louis Vuitton monogram. And it's called Under My Skin, and the idea is that people can get not just under my skin, but under other people's skin. It's about empathy and like being in the place of another person. But on the textile level, it's also playing with human fur or with human skin. And I have a whole thing with hair, so you're going to see in my collection. So, how did we went from street art to digital fashion? This is when I switch. These were the works I was doing in the 90s. I was doing video already, early 90s video art when it was just starting. This is my nipple. Talk about free the nipple. So I got this camera where you could film your body, like for wrinkles, for beauty shops, and I kind of like hacked it into doing this human portrait where you can see somebody very close only, but you're so close that you cannot see the person. So it could be anybody, it's skin, like we're all humans, but at the same time it's very intimate because it's very close. It's like obscene because the camera is super on you, but it's also intimate at the same time. So I was working with this notion of the portrait. I'm skipping 2 or 3 years or 5 years between art and art here. After the video part, I started doing street art. So I was doing these performances that were very minimal, and I thought, how can I do the minimum waste, the minimum use of materials, to make the maximum use of like sense or reflection. So this is a series I had where I went through Milan, singing love songs to churches. There was the whole scandal about abuse of children from the church, so I decided to make like a political work, and instead of being violent, I thought I'm going to just go sing a love song to the offenders. So I went and every time that I found a church in Italy, there's like a church every 2 streets, so every time I found a church, I would sing a love song to them. It's a specific love song that won the Eurovision Song Festival in the 60s. So it was a song that an Italian girl sang and won when she was 16. So she was underage. She won the Eurovision Song Festival, and I was repeating that song to the churches until I got to the main cathedral in Duomo di Milan. Then in Amsterdam, much further, in 2010, I came to this idea of identity, and I designed myself like an outfit of Where's Wally or Where's Waldo, and I did this performance in the King's Day or Queen's Day back then, where I would get lost in the crowd and I would try to find people similar to me, and that's the moment where I found Walda here, and I made a video out of it. And this is going to come in my presentations. This is what I'm showing you, this notion of looking for the other, looking for your other half. That's the outfit, like this is me at the time, and this is me as Wally. And then I continued with street art, so I developed this idea of minimum materials, so just cardboard and white flour or powder chalk. I would do portraits of political guerrilla people from Latin America, and I would do a hopscotch game. So I would print them just like with stencils, and at the end of this mantra type of print, I would just play the game and destroy them. Or I would leave it in the street so that other people would play the game and would destroy it. It was a simple artwork. It was just a cardboard or some chalk. It was very difficult to travel through the airports with a kilo of white powder, being Latin American. But sometimes I just bought it in the supermarket. When I went to China, for example, or when I went to Turkey, I just left the kilo at home. But this was also, again, with the churches, like how to be poetical and how to be political and how to use humor to create reflection. All my works have that. And then how can you do it wasting or buying or spending the minimum amount of money? And this was a very clever one, because this started for a film festival and it got me traveling for like 6 years. They kept on asking me and they kept on inviting me to festivals where I would just say like, yes, you have to fly me in. I mean, it's me the one who does it. So this I think was my last art series. And it ended up being more like a deconstructed hopscotch game with the countries of the European Union. So it became this game of accession to the European Union, being accepted or not in the community. And then I played the game, but then other people played the game. It was very interesting to see who dared to do it. And here I have a more political artwork, and here's where we get digital. So I made this digitally printed carpet that I designed, and I changed just one letter. So instead of Netherlands, it became Neverland. So it was a work about migration. And I put it in the door in the entrance of the museum in Rotterdam. So people had to choose if they would step over the Queen, mind you, that's the Queen of the Netherlands then. And then at the end of the museum, there was this surveillance camera, so that people who were already in could see what was happening in the entrance. And it was a funny experiment because Dutch people tend to jump like the corners, and foreigners, they just walked over the but then when you get at the end of the museum, you realize that you were being filmed. So it was kind of like a loop thing. And here's where we make a big jump into fashion. When I became like a fashion teacher, I started to reflect over memory and childhood, and I started drawing with a sewing machine and say, how can I draw? And I make traces that are not necessarily garments. So I made these puffed patterns with portraits. And again, the puffed part will come back in the digital fashion work that I'm doing. So different moments where I would draw and I would sew with a sewing machine without having the foot, so I could just do whatever I wanted. And here we go to fashion, and we were discussing about that. So how did I get into digital fashion? I wanted to do a rain jacket for my Vermouth big bike, so it had to be a little bit fashionable. And I get very grumpy when it's raining and I have to take these plastic pants and then you get all wet and it's really uncomfortable. So I thought about having like strap-on, like kind of like that I could just strap on, strap off, and it was all in one piece. And so while I was doing it, I was wasting a lot of material. This is the final design. So I came with the idea during lockdown, this was just in the transition, why don't I do it digitally, and then I save money and I save off, wasting so much fabric, because I couldn't get the size of the pocket, I couldn't get the size of the thing, and sewing the neck was a pain, so I had to do like 3 samples and I was not getting there. So I decided to just jump into digital until I could see it, and in the process I created my own avatar, which was really fun. And that's when I thought, okay, this we could teach to students. If you do your own avatar, it becomes like super fun. And that's when I got motivated to keep on doing it. So I finished, as you see, this garment, and then I thought, I'm done sewing. I'm not gonna be a sewing person. It's difficult, it's a craft, and I don't have the patience. But when I'm doing digital fashion, these were the first things. I can sew metal. I can do things with glass. I can do, so many materials. And every time you sew, the line is perfect. So you don't waste any material. And you just need some time, and it's super sustainable because you don't waste fabric. The only thing you need is, yes, the software and electricity. So what I was just talking a minute earlier when we were in the conversation is the notion of errors. When you're learning something, like a 3D software or something that you don't know, the learning curve is steep and you make lots of errors. But as an artist, I learned how to incorporate these errors. So these are moments where I was trying to do a puffer something and they just explode, or you're trying to do a displacement texture and they just collapse. And I took on those errors. Sometimes I did a screenshot. The best, I didn't do the screenshot, but you keep on these things in your memory. And the idea is to harness these mistakes. And this is how my collection came about. It was errors, and I managed to harness these errors and produce some garments from it. So then I came with this platform of the Fabricant, that's what was called Lila, and you could scan your face, and you could adopt any body. So you could be a plus-size body, you could have like a female identifying body or a masculine identifying body, and play with it. And I thought this was great because you could try different identities, different body sizes, and see yourself in different gender expressions. And this is when the things start getting more into a collection. And today I would like to do a virtual fitting for somebody, so prepare your ideas when I ask you some questions. This gave birth to my collection. It was the first puffer jacket, and I can export a transparent garment and just put it into people. Just like you would do with these paper dolls that you cut out and you just put it over the person. So this is the use case for a fashion academy. You can go from sketch to sampling, endlessly until you finish your garment. You don't waste any material. And then when the sample is ready on the avatar with the measures of that sample, you can go and produce it physically, or in my case, just digitally. I don't want to do physical production. So you can go from sketch to digital garment, which is called virtual fitting, without wasting, without going through the material production. We can also review how we do this in Photoshop as well. Here is more like gender experimentation. This is the power of digital fashion as well. We were talking about expression, and it's like people with gender dysphoria. Like if I would like to wear this and I have to go to the supermarket, maybe I would think it twice. But with digital fashion, you can design yourself whatever you want to wear. You don't have to buy garments from a marketplace or from a game. You can design yourself your garments and experiment as much as you want with any material and see how it would look on you. Then you might as well do it and go to the supermarket, but you don't need to get there. So it allows a lot of experimentation, not only with what you're wearing, but also how you express your gender. And this was the fun part. The moment I did my avatar, I just quickly winged it. So I put my face on an existing pancake of an avatar, and it worked. And this is when it became really fun, because it was not just an avatar from the software, it was me that I was dressing. And here's some experimentations from the collection. So I experimented with pieces from a fashion designer, and then I started exploring textures. So you'll hear about that in a second. I discovered that I could create different textures that didn't exist in real life. I could puncture leather. I can do things that you cannot do with traditional fashion. And that's just flyer. This is what I do. I go with students to museums. We analyze historical fashion, and we look at references in popular culture. I also am the person who does diversity and inclusion trainings. So how to work with neurodiversity, gender diversity, sexual diversity, or any kind of diversity. Any questions so far? No?
How did it change your life experience, like in daily, this work?
And this work, it did change what I was just saying. It's like about expressing yourself with fashion. I'm not a person that is like super luxury fashion. I'm quite relaxed with what I choose to buy. And when I was doing this, I decided to stop buying fashion. It's a very good question, because I forgot to say that. During lockdown, I started designing that first puffer jacket was when we were in lockdown. So instead of going shopping for 3 hours and you spend money and you come with things and then you feel guilty because it was just the dopamine moment and then you don't really like half of the things that you bought, I realized I could invest 3 hours, and I said, can I do a jacket in 3 hours? And I actually did a jacket in 3 hours. So I felt like instead of shopping, I'm educating myself. So you change consumption by education or self-education, and in that sense it really changed my life, because it awakened again that spirit from the Atari from the 80s, that I had fun with the computer, and I thought like I'm having so much fun. One day I was until 2 a.m. designing things for my avatar, and in that sense it awakened creativity and curiosity again. So because before I was working as marketing manager or this and that, and then I went back into more like child mode or artist mode, and started experimenting again with like my expression.
So basically, you're saying that even playing with the idea is changing. You don't need to wear it.
No.
The design part of the playing change your perspective on physical objects.
Yeah, I had so much fun doing it that I didn't need to wear that puffer jacket to go to the street, because we couldn't go to the street. But I also realized I didn't have to consume. Just creating and experimenting was satisfying enough. So actually I thought, how long can I stay without buying clothes? And it was actually all lockdown. So I was like 15 months or like a year and a half. I didn't buy anything. And then like it changed my life, because I went on buying things again. But now I am more conscious, so I buy what I need. I try to repair things, and for me, this digital fashion can be the extravagant layer that you can load and experiment and you don't have any impact on the planet. So I can wear pearls over glass and oil dripping, but you're not, having any impact on that digital creation. So for me, what I see about the future is like, I think in the future we're going to dress much more consciously and much more simply, almost like a jumpsuit. And then the extravagant layer and the experimentation will go augmented. So more conscious, more durable, more smart textiles. And then all the experimentation and expression is going to be like the digital layer.
Maybe another question. So basically, if I design myself as a lady, let's say, you think it's going to change something in my brain? Like, how do I perceive women? Like, if I build my avatar as a woman, and like, there is a connection, you think it's going to change how I understand?
I don't know if it changed how you treat women, because that's something like more personal, but for sure, what happened to me when I was playing with this Lila platform, and I could see myself as a plus-size woman, or as a plus-size man, or as a very tiny person, or half and half, it really changed the way I see myself. So, and that's what I was saying, sometimes there are people who want to experiment with their expression, but don't want to do it like in public, or like I wouldn't go, walking around in a catsuit, but maybe I want to see how I look in a catsuit. And that freedom of experimenting, I think, already changes you. It doesn't need to be applied to how you see other people in a catsuit, but just that you dare to experiment and be more fluid, for sure is going to change your relation to other people. Women or people that are fluid as well. We're going to see that with an avatar as well, like a gender-neutral avatar. So I'm going to go a little bit quickly because it's already 26 minutes. You can see this in my website if you want to read like much more about the story behind the garments. It's because my garments have a story. So each garment, it's 6 garments in the collection. I see it as a potential collection in itself. So it's more like a root, like the center of a tree. Each one of these garments could extend into a full collection. Why it's called displays? Because it's kind of like a cross between clothes, objects, textures, and sometimes it's just also noise between the real and the virtual. And I explore texture maps. So I see texture maps as social maps and displacement maps that create texture. Also I see as displaced identities, and that's what we were just talking about. It's not just displacing the texture of this fabric. I see it like a displacement of experimenting with your identity. So every collection starts with a mood board. I channeled one of my old artworks. I'm not going to show you, not to extend so much, but it was an artwork where I work a lot with latex and punk spikes. So I channeled my early punk person, and I created this collection where this was the feeling. So you start with a feeling, and you start with materials and colors and vegan anti-fur, and I have this thing of lace, and this was one of the mistakes. This was one of the errors that I screenshotted, and I really loved it. So I thought, how can I harness this one that for me looks like a chicken woman? Also looks like some sort of explosion, and I thought, okay, I can explode textures or displacement maps if I separate them enough from the avatar or the fabric. And this is how the collection started. So I had some feelings for iridescent colors, I had things for spikes, and this was the feeling. And I also discovered these hairy virgins from the Renaissance. I already knew about them, but I've always been fascinated by these sinful women that are covered with hair. Because in religion, women couldn't walk around naked, so they would represent them as hairy, and they're called Hairy Marys and Hairy Mary Magdalene. So I put all these things together, Vivienne Westwood, essence of punk, and this was the beginning. This is an Argentinian artist. Probably some people in the audience know her, Nicola Constantino. She's working with nipples and high-end fashion. So things start having multiple relations there. Then you organize the collection a little bit. I created some samples of views. I created some samples of textures that I wanted to use. So I harnessed this chicken woman into exploded lace. This is lace that becomes sort of like bone or coral or different things. And I harnessed these spikes that I would just explode textures with them. And then I created my own materials, textures, and colors collage. or board. And these are the garments. So this one is called The Story of Awe, and it's based on a book, and it's all about transparency, the woman that becomes transparent. It's about fragility and transparency. So it's the border between the garment and the body is not clear, because the textures are displaced, are floating over the body. So you see that these rings are just floating over her body. And the dress is also transparent, so it's an invitation of people to wear it. It comes with a black mini skirt, but you can also wear it with jeans or whatever you want. So you can just delete that layer or use it with the undergarment. So you can co-create and you wear whatever you want to wear with this tunic over it. Then this one is about fragility, and I already explained how I created this, exploring the lace texture. This is more about the combination of being rigid and calcified, but being flexible at the same time. So this garment behaves like latex. You see it moving. This is the loop file with different angles. And you see that it's flexible and it's rigid at the same time. So it's this combination of fragility and strength. So we went from the transparent woman to the fragile and rigid woman. And this is when it gets punk. So what I did here is I got a polka dot, like dots texture, and I exploded it so that it became kind of like spikes. So the way I see it is like Paleolithic spikes, like these needles from the cavemen or the cave women. So I called it paleopunk, because it has something like primal, and it has something fashion, and it has something also punk about it. This is the garment, the skirt comes through the other one, so it punctures the leather. The idea of this garment as well, and this is other thing that digital fashion allows, is that it can adapt to the skin of the person. So, I don't know if I have another image now. So, if somebody with another skin tone wears it, I can just get a pixel from their nose or from their neck and change the color. The idea is that it looks as if you don't have anything and you just have the neck, the spikes, and this belt. That's like the optical illusion I want to give. And then I thought I'm going to make a digital portrait. This is the scan that I was showing you that I did in the 90s. And I did like a self-portrait in a garment. So it's a puffer jacket. And the idea is to work with human hair, but also in an organized pattern. So kind of like human fur in a way, which is a little bit like cannibal and not cannibal. So this is it. I modeled it myself, and this is like a one-off. So each one of these are iteration number one of a series, and that's the other thing with digital fashion. There, you can change something and make iterations forever. So it's much more like a design thinking way of creating. Finally, no, I have two more. I did the mink nipples. So this is one that I really had fun. It's more like a queer garment for men and women. And again, it's exploring this notion of body hair, where I simulated like displaced armpits, and this is called piping, which is the borders of the garment, and I can do the piping with mink fur, because they were killing all this mink during Corona, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to make like a homage to the minks and do something that you can never do. So this is a glass garment, it's transparent, and it's glass with fur, what you cannot do in real life. So my garments are digital only because you cannot recreate them physically. And here you see where it changes color, so it can adapt to different tones of skin, or even pink or blue, whatever you want. So they can change according to the wish of the person that's wearing them. Also there's like this dripping nipple effect. So it's like nipples dripping hair. And finally, the Hairy Mary that came in the collage. So this was like the final garment, and it's based on Mary Magdalene. So the story says when Jesus died, Mary Magdalene, which was like the one who got his message, went to the desert and lived forever, illuminated in a cave without clothes. So the miracle says that when she went to the heavens, God covered her in hair, so she wouldn't be naked. So for me, there's this whole thing about women being shamed for being hairy and being forced to shave themselves. So there's a lot of hair shaming. And I wanted to do a garment about that, about you know, how we embrace, enhance, control, or suppress the hair as part of our self-expression. And men do it as well. We shave, we trim, we try to control the curls or get more curls. So like we have a relation with hair, and that's also part of our self-expression. So I wanted to bring that in garments as well. And this is what the first iteration. So we see one of the Renaissance Hairy Marys. And I wanted to bring that in a print. And the print also creates these cavity effects, as if she was like hollow from the inside. This is also iteration 1, so many more will come. And these are simple garments. It's like a hoodie that I just change and transform. As a designer, I have like 5, this is my manifesto. So what I believe as a digital fashion designer is an inclusive metaverse. So not just for some people, but for everybody with physical disabilities, with different genders, with different religions and different abilities. I believe in education over consumption, what I was just saying, like I didn't consume clothing and I just educated myself. Creativity as a driver for the community, and also immaterial first and physical if necessary. And that's what I'm trying to do. Like when I really want to buy it, when I need something, I buy it. But if I just want to self-express or do something crazy, I do it online and I do it with digital fashion. And finally, transparency. Not like transparent clothes, but transparency in the process of who you are or the impact that you do. That's the first part about the digital collection. Any questions from this? Yes?
Yeah. I just want to see your vision or your ideas on how this could be like, because I can clearly see that, for example, these kind of garments or this kind of clothing that people could experiment with, I think it could be used, for example, in augmented reality, because people could wear it and you could see them, so they could change whatever they like.
Yeah.
So I just want to know your vision on the usability of this in the metaverse, and how do you see it in the future? Like, how do you see this in the future?
Yeah, very good question. I can just answer from my personal perspective. That's the problem that I have actually, because I've developed like these collections. Let's start here, let's go back here. I developed these collections and I could just mint them as editorial flat image and like put them in OpenSea and try to sell them. But I don't want to do that, because part of the discussion we were having with you as well was, what's the usability of this? If I'm going to buy it as a customer or if I'm going to sell it as a designer, how are people going to use it? Because I think digital fashion won't have a function as protect you from the rain. This is not going to protect you from the rain. So it's not functional in that sense, but in order to be a garment, for me from a conceptual level, you need to be able to wear it somehow. So just a JPEG doesn't cut it for me. I wouldn't feel comfortable to just sell that as this is digital fashion. That's an editorial, that's like a photo, but it's not wearable. So somehow it needs to be wearable, even if it's not functional or in the physical realm. And that's where I'm kind of like at the moment, where it's like I would like it to be augmented somehow. And the technology is there, and there are a couple of marketplaces that I'm going to show, and one that I discovered today as well, some tools that help you wear these garments in your virtual life. So I have an example here of jewels that you can load into your Zoom calls, and you have earrings that follow you and move with you. So I think in less than a couple of years, what we're going to be seeing, and the technology is already there, is that just when you load the background on Zoom, you can change the background or blur it. You're going to be able to load a garment just from the same menu, and you just put there your garment and you just load a suit or load a tie or load the skin, hair, fur texture. So an in-front layer and a back layer, that's happening already. With the Snap Lens, you can actually do that and integrate virtual garments, take it out of Snapchat and load it into your video calls, for example.
I think maybe another option that you will see more, that NFT clubs will go into entertainment. So it could be comics or it could be TV show, and then everything's going to be digital. So they can use digital garments as okay, I'm using your you know, your fashion in my TV show, which is all about like a virtual world.
Yeah.
Maybe it's going to be an open marketplace for people to exchange creatures and apes and I don't know, clothes, and suddenly you can create a TV show which is it's from digital, it's not like a Pixar or I don't know, like a studio. It's more an open source marketplace for identity and clothes.
So what I see now is like taking these garments that are like functional in platforms that we can just use them on our phones and we can augment them and share them and lend them. And you know, this thing about digital fashion is it doesn't get old, it doesn't get wrinkled, you don't have to wash it, and you can duplicate it and share it and copy it as many times as you want. And that's when NFTs are interesting, because somebody can be the owner of the original garment, but you can do copies of it and share it or have a festival where everybody's wearing it, etc. But there's still the designer or the person who bought it, the owner. That's like a use case I see for NFTs. But again, my question as a designer is that if I'm going to call it digital fashion, it needs to be wearable somehow. Not just a flat version of it, because then it's just like buying a poster of a garment instead of buying the garment in the shop. You don't go to the shop and say, buy the garment poster. You see it on a magazine or marketing, but actually you want to use that accessory or that garment. But we are there. It's not like a far-fetched future. It's happening now. Technology is a little bit clunky and it's a little bit kept in marketplaces or in hubs. And I think soon it's going to be in everybody's phone.
Yeah. And even in augmented reality, I think it could be used really like people. Well, I'm not saying that people would be wearing like a VR headset all over the place and you can see what's going on. But this could be used in specific contexts, like I don't know exactly which context, but there's a lot of use cases. I mean,
yeah, and I think it's up to us to all think about use cases, because the technology is there, and then we need to like use the technology. Like lame example, but like a hammer, you can use it to build things. You can use it to break somebody's head. You know, it's like how do you use the technology that is more important than the tool itself. And that's like where we need humans and not only robots. That is like how are you going to creatively use it to enhance your creativity for the artist. You know, I don't think artificial intelligence is going to replace. It's going to replace a lot of jobs, but like I think it's going to work in tandem with creative people. Although it can produce paintings on itself, for a fashion designer or a creative director, it can help make like informed decisions and help you in your creative process. Like when you're doing that mood board, artificial intelligence can help you a lot as well. For example, there's like a company called Euritech, which crawls constantly all the social medias, all the Instagram from all the world, and you can go like Japan, winter, 2025, and it's going to tell you which animal print is going to be fashionable. Not just animal print, but which animal print. And then you can switch it to North America, and it might be another animal print. So artificial intelligence can help companies and designers to foresee the future while they're designing. And then you can take the choices. But you know, so it works like in tandem. So I don't think we're going to be replaced by the robot, but I think we have to coexist with this intelligence and know how to use technology in our creative process.
Yeah, I think the technology is there, but then the big question is about adoption of the technology.
Yeah.
Because now, from what I see as a fashion designer, digital fashion designer, you can create these clothing, these garments, you can create enhancements, and probably and certainly there is technology that is accessible to you without necessarily being a developer to create these files and make them in 3D and make them available. But the question is, well, where is the metaverse? Where is the people, the users who are easily going to be able to access to this platform where the technology it is available, but the platform is not there, and that they are going to purchase the product or acquire the product somehow in a standard format that can be easily where.
Well, in a second, I'm going to talk a little bit about the metaverse, but I think like any trend, you can just Google like a curve of trends. There's always, you know, the visionaries, the early adopters, and then it goes to the masses, and there's always a couple of years, so we could talk about 5 years or 10 years. I think in 10 years, everybody's going to be wearing digital fashion. And the fabricant has like a prediction that says something like in 2025, physical garments will be obsolete. Maybe that's
2025.
yeah, so something like that. Maybe that's too much, but I think in 10 years, what we're talking today as like fantasy, it is going to be in everybody's life. And there's another projection in one of these papers that I shared, which says that maybe in 10 years or something, a percentage of our wardrobe is going to be digital. And that's what I believe more. Like I was saying, you're going to buy functional, durable, high-tech, maybe more expensive garments that will last longer. And then 5% of those things will be digital that you will be wearing on socials when you want to be extravagant. Or just like when I went to the conference, I was showing that video. I went to the conference all in black, but then I just loaded this astronaut designer outfit, and that's what I share. And like the engagement of one post and the other are super different. Like if I would just say I went to the conference in black t-shirt, okay, my friends would like it. But then when I posted the other one, it got much more impressions. So it got like 7,000 impressions in very little time. So if I would write a report of the conference, which one gets more visibility? And we're talking about my knowledge, my report, but get enhanced because I'm wearing this fashion. So it doesn't need to be...
There is a utility.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't need to be a utility of protection from the rain, but there is a utility in the way you use the technology. And I was using the same example with my master thesis. I just finished my master thesis on how to teach cloth 3D using design thinking. And I'm thinking I'm lucky if 6 people read it. But if I post it with an image of digital fashion and the animation, and I put the link to the thesis, probably much more people are going to read it because they get engaged and interested in what is this. So there is a usability that is now.
I think this is really critical because if you enter a space, it's all about future. It's about how do you look and where are you, not also in real life. So if you take this picture, you see like in the Bored Ape Yacht Club or Twitter, everything is bored like apes, even though they take the pictures apes. So now imagine, because they're signaling the rest of the people, this is who we are, and this is really cool. And what you're doing, I totally see utility, because if I can get, I don't know, 10 impressions or 7,000 impressions, just augmenting my picture, definitely there's utility. This is like enhancing whatever you call social media.
Yeah. And I also see it like we're very playfully, everybody has played with these like puppy ears or whatever in Snapchat. Like if you see like a little more like usable case, you can just load that and you can load garments and t-shirts and prints on your garments without having to be like a puppy or something. So it starts like playful, and I think more and more we're going to find uses for that. It's already 47 minutes. I just wanted to ask the people, what would you like? Would you like to see like the slides about fashion and the metaverse? Or I could also switch to like the premiere and show you like the workshop part, that is how do I mount these like layers. I don't know what you prefer. Raise your hands, like who would like to see more like the how-to of the premiere and the garments? Both quick, okay, let's just do both quick, good. So also I'm not going to do it because that's when things go wrong, so I'm going to show you. Let's start with this animation that I was just showing in the social media. Let me pull quickly the premiere. I'm just going to show you Cloth 3D because I really love it, this software. It probably looks more like a CAD software for architecture. So what happens is you have a split interface, that's my avatar, and then you have the patterns here. So whatever you do to the patterns, when you simulate, it will happen here. So you can immediately change the pattern and it will be reflected here. Now there's a texture and there's a whole thing, but you don't see it because this is the quick version. Yeah, I'm not going to start altering things because that's when things go weird, but technically you can just make this shorter or bigger or smaller, or we can also delete the sleeves if you want. And then when you render, then you see the magic happen. So now I have it like metal or leather, shiny leather, and I did this iridescence texture that is just like this bug that was in my mood board. So you can change any color of this. Maybe I can do that quickly. Let me see. If I click here, and I go to this fabric, there I have the colors. So let's say when I was with this blue background, I didn't want it peachy, I just wanted more green. then it changes right away. You know, so I can change any of these colors. That was not a main color, but you see the green appearing there. So it's kind of like real time. So you can change the materials, and some materials you don't need to render, so they will just appear directly on the low resolution. But you can adapt your garment to anything, and you can also load backgrounds. So when I'm doing these virtual fittings that you saw in the videos, what I do is I load myself on the pose, on the background. So I just stick my photo on the background, and then I move the avatar until I match it, you know, to the angle or the pose where I'm stopping. And then you can also start moving the avatar as well. But once you match the photo with the pose, then I just export this without the avatar. So you can export per layer, or you can export this, and then I will obtain a transparent image, and then I put it onto the person in Photoshop. I'm going to skip that one, and I'm going to show you the video part that was. Yes. The sample that I did with a green screen, because I wanted to try the technique of green screen for the shadows and for people who do some other effects in After Effects, but I just work with Premiere. But it works both. From Clo 3D, you can export with a color background, in this case green, or you can export with transparent background. It's just one extra step when you want to do green screen, but you can just do it fully transparent. And what I do, if you know a little bit about video editing, you know, these are just layers. So this is the background, that it's there. And these are just animations that I have. And I just remove the green, so I apply the green screen, and they become layers. So that's one layer of a person, that's the other layer of a person. And those are all layers. So you have a background. You have the main character, or the catwalk, so the person going into the scene, and the others are just these little layers of people that go behind or in front of this one, the main one. This is the main one. So you just work with layers. This is the person, the catwalk, let's say. I'm gonna make this invisible. And you have the background and the person. And the cut there, that's the close-up. Then I just load one behind, that's going behind the person, and then one in front. And you can put as many persons as you want, so you could just start. I don't have a mouse here, so it gets tricky to work without it, but let's try to paste it here. Paste it again. So I can just bring these ones here. And you go layering. So one walks behind the other. And well, you can play for hours, so then you can bring another piece, like this one. And then have him, and have people, and have different scales and different close-up, etc. So this is like the quick version of the workshop. There's also a way of importing in Premiere, if you don't know, like when we have, Clo will do each one of the frames separately, so sometimes they're like 900 frames. And there's also, in case you don't know, a quick trick where you can just click the first one, if they all have the same name, and you just click options and image sequence, and you just need to import one, and Premiere will generate the video for you. So this saves a lot of time when you're animating. And then let's say if I put this one here, this is a totally different video, then I have the nipples rotating there. That's the one I just imported. So, that was the short version. Let's go back to the fashion part. And maybe one day it will be interesting to do one only about Clo, where I can show like how do you do actually the garments. But then I need to have my gaming computer. This is going to be a marathon. If you find something interesting, let's talk later, or you can Google it or ask me, because this could be like overwhelming, because I would need another half an hour. But identity in the metaverse, and I talked about this in at Amsterdam conference. So let me go a little bit. Who was in MedAms from here? You were there. You were there. Okay, 4. So you saw part of this already. Yeah. Yes. So, my metaphor is Jem The Holograms. I don't know if you're old enough to see Jem The Holograms, but it was 1985 when I was playing with the Atari, and then this was kind of like a girl cartoon. And the whole story is like the father of her died and left her by surprise this computer machine, that it could be like any of our laptops today. And this computer machine had like a persona inside, which was Synergy. And Synergy worked with a device. So Jem had these earrings that were projectors of holograms that would project her clothes over her. So by day she was whatever, and by night she was this pop star that looks like Britney Spears. But anyway, and so this would be a hologram that this computer was loading onto her. And for me, that's kind of like a metaphor. I have the link to the first episode, but we're gonna skip it, where she discovers this machine, and it's very interesting what happens there, because she's like, this is not real, and it's a hologram. And I look at it today, and it's like, oh, this is digital fashion now, today. So it took like 21 years, but we're there. If we go to the fashion world, this is Alexander Mcqueen, maybe some of you know him. Excellent designer. And in 2006, in the middle of the scandal with this model, he created a fashion show where she was a hologram. So he created a hologram for the fashion show itself. Since then, since 2016, it's been mounted twice for exhibitions. One was like in a little box, where you could see her like this. Then it was redone life size, so you could see her live 3D around you. So my first question is, aren't we already living in a hologram? If we, when we design or we create a technology, then I always ask myself, did we create it, or it was created already and we're part of it? So maybe we are living in this world of Jem and the holograms now. And quickly, what is identity? Identity are 2 things. So it's individuality and sameness. So it's the expression of individuality that sometimes is maintained through different situations. So in virtual fashion, I ask myself, which parts do you express and which parts do you maintain or which parts do you change? Like, you're not the same person in Instagram that you are in LinkedIn, for example. So some of your traits you maintain, some of the others you choose to change or experiment. Maybe I do want to be a plus-size woman in one metaverse, but I want to be myself when I'm doing a lecture on Zoom. And then we come with a metaphor of Westworld. So there's this movie series that it's like a world where millionaires take a train and then they just go to the Far West and they can do whatever they want. So it's the Far West, high-tech, and all the characters are robots. It's very interesting psychologically to analyze. I'm not going to go there, I'm going to go a little bit quickly, but the question that I ask myself is, what's the metaverse? So for me, that's a metaphor of the metaverse. The word meta means between, after, and beyond. So we move between these virtual worlds in the metaverse. They are created after Web 1 and 2, but the metaverse exists beyond our physical reality. So it's all of those at the same time. It's in between, it's more than, and it's after. So the philosophical definition is the universe that is duplicating itself to understand itself by reflection. It's like the universe looking at the mirror. Number 2 is the universe that transcends the physical limitations by looking at itself from an immaterial perspective. So it has to do with materiality and immateriality. It's like a very spiritual type of definition. And then we came to Balenciaga. I really recommend that you Google this if you don't know it, because for me this is a good example of how a brand is using the metaphors and the technology from gaming for gamers into their target audience without being like trying to get like a quick game. So they really understood their audience, they really understood what gaming is, what the characters are, and they created a collection in a lookbook using Unreal Engine, where each one of these characters is presented like a game, and you can rotate them, and there's all the cameras around them. On top of that, they mix like medieval aesthetics with streetwear. So it has this Dungeons and Dragons layer, but it has this modern gaming layer, and you can see the lookbook. This was actually garments in reality, and it was a fashion show, and they also designed a game. So this game, or this thing, is called Afterworld. And when you go in the video, we're not going to play it, but you see this hologram. So it connects again with this metaverse and the hologram idea. And you start somewhere here in a shop where you see the garments, but then you can wander around this world. You can go to a rave, you can go to the street, and it's a world. It's the afterworld. This is the lookbook. It's really nice, and you can rotate the characters, very hyper-realistic. You can zoom in and zoom out. So then my second question is, are we living in the metaverse? Maybe we are already living in a metaverse that somebody else created or something else created, and we're like avatars in that metaverse. So, identity. This was a topic that we could be talking for hours, but identity plus metaverse, we already defined this. How is our physical identity coexisting with our digital identity? So my point is somewhere between the spectrum of being always the same and recognizable, and that people can know who you are and you always dress and look the same. And then we talk about interoperability. So I want to look like Where's Waldo in Roblox or in Decentraland. So then my garment or my fashion needs to be interoperable, consistent, recognizable, and repeatable. And I think some people will go there. Like some people are always the same in all the profile pictures. But some other people go for uniqueness, and they want to go with this is for me the drivers: exploration, expansion, and experimentation. So the driver here is creativity. So from the uniform to the unicorn and all the spaces in between. So some people will want to be unicorns in every metaverse. Some people want to be recognizable, but there's also everything is a spectrum. So some people will, float from one side to the other. And this is the paper that I recommended everybody. It's on the LinkedIn. Really recommended. If you want to get more into digital fashion, this is what you need to look. It has interviews and surveys, so it has data and predictions. It has a timeline. I'm not going to explain so much. For me, like highlights is the Balenciaga show, where I say that they really know what they're doing. Nike acquiring RTFKT studios, so big brand acquiring this cool studio. And the Snapchat filters, that's the technology we've been talking about. Everybody that is bought digital fashion in some of the verticals bought fashion. So fashion is being consumed by everybody who's buying virtual assets. And the number one reason is identity. It's not functionality, it's expressing or showing your identity or experimenting with your identity. These are brands that are in the space, which I recommend. I recommend looking at Replicant. Really cool, really interesting what they're doing. Replicant Fashion, Republic Fashion, Tribute Brand, the Fabricant, everybody knows it, Ouroboros. So this is a little bit very well known for fashion people, maybe less known for other type of audiences. Ouroboros, have a look at that. London Fashion Week, 1 year ago. Tribute Brand, Republic, and Replicant, they're all on Instagram. And how to use, or how use cases and examples on how digital fashion is being used. So then you have this, this chart. And there's digital garments and then environments. So there's digital garments in digital environments, digital garments mounted onto physical people, like what I was showing that I do. Physical garments shown in digital avatars, but they want to sell the physical garment, and then physical. So, for example, this square, I don't get it so good, but the example is like a t-shirt that triggers a layer. So the physical triggers another layer. And for people developing, what do this paper recommend? It recommends design for identity, not for protection, warmth, or functionality. Build a seamless experience, whether you want to bring people to a shop or bring them to a game, like what Balenciaga did really well, that it's seamless for the person experiencing it. And then code for the collective. And my take here is that you need to open up. You cannot just keep the patterns and keep the thing and make it very exclusive. I think the notion of community is super important. And I have an example of a Chilean designer, Lupe Ejardo. What she did for London Fashion Week last year is that she released the patterns of her collection before the London Fashion Week. And she put them in a crowdfunding. So you could buy one garment for €6 or the whole collection. And she actually asked people to change her garments before the collection was done. So that's the opposite than Balenciaga from the 1930s, where people would trade and there would be spies trading these patterns. Is the opposite. It's just release everything and let the community play with it. Are we tired?
Well, we have Lucas.
Yeah. So let's stop here. I have a couple of examples. Let me show one from all the others, which is this one. If you forget everything, the one that I like most of digital fashion at the moment is the Institute of Digital Fashion. They're from the UK. These are the two leaders. One is gender fluid for sure, and they said there's like little diversity in the avatar community. People work with DAS here, DAS, yeah. That's a marketplace where you can download assets and avatars. They're very sexualized. They're very like extreme. The men are men, and the women are women. And, it's very over-sexualized women. And they were annoyed by this, and what they did is changing the systems from within. So they designed with an avatar designer an avatar based on them, that is gender fluid. So doesn't identify as a man, doesn't identify as a woman, and you can buy it on that marketplace. So you can buy it, so they infiltrated this hyper-gendered space. Instead of complaining from the outside, they created an option. So that's Cathy 8.1. And the poses and the narrative is a protest. Sometimes has a mustache, sometimes not. Makeup, no makeup. So it's a gender fluid avatar. So this is my take for today. If you want to explore more, they have this also very interesting cover on the Pride Italy, and they also have a paper. Check this paper as well about identity in the Metaverse. So I recommend the paper on fashion in the Metaverse and this paper of the Institute of Digital Fashion if you want to know more. Thank you very much.